lane issue, that it's an actual travel lane issue. There used to be lanes on Taft that are not there anymore. So if y'all, aside from bikes,
Charles, do not take my the bike lane map that LCG. Only reason I maintain is because I work for the MPO. LCG does not have a bike facility map, which is extremely frustrating. Do not take it as affecting the traffic model. This is purely, I was the only person who decided to map bike facilities in all of Lafayette. I'm sorry. I mean, like that's what, don't take that as having an impact on the overall traffic of the project.
Now, it would.
I mean, that's what I'm frustrated at, because this is not taking into the actual roadway context of the road being changed. This was an advisory map, and I was the only person in Lafayette who maintained it.
Derek, we've got a few minutes and we have several other items to.
You're all right.
So
yes, I'm losing ground. I'm sorry.
To move on.
Let us move along. We've got about 25 minutes left. I want to leave this part of the conversation, at least for now, but right, there's still an ongoing conversation. Obviously, we're going to do some looking at Taft. The roadway folks, it's a very different process, very different deliverable, and a giantly different level of effort that have gone into the road work. So just because some little colored line on a map thing is wrong doesn't mean that it impugns Gary and the traffic team's work and all the DOTDs and all that stuff. That's a wholly different process. But let's go to the street furniture, because there's some things there that we really want you to be able to weigh in on before we come back to you next time. Because what we'd like to do is get enough input that we can bring back to you a proposed a palette of things in one style, and then use that populating it through the renderings and stuff. Two or three more down. Number 15, maybe. All right, and then the next one. So we looked at, actually, why don't you show like 3 or 4 slides at a time, you know what I mean? And show, if you can, show all the furnishings at once. If you can show a few slides at once, if not, that's fine. So what we were trying to do is really think about what could be provided. We looked at what you had locally. We've come up with some different suites, and we'd like to hear from you on that. We did get a lot of questions about who's going to pay for this, where are they going to go, et cetera, et cetera. And we're writing out some formal answers to you on that. The project pays for part of this, but a robust number of these would be looking for local partners to participate in it, depending on where they go and what purposes they serve, right? So let's start with some aesthetics, because that's pretty actionable. All of y'all can have an opinion on the aesthetics of the furnishings. So let's see that first suite. All right, thank you. This one's subtle curves. I can't speak with the eloquence that Josh did last week when he introduced all of these, but you get the idea. Slightly more modern, not hearkening back to the past as much, pretty smooth. Most of them are sort of, they wouldn't jump out at you. I think that little bike rack piece sort of jumps out a bit. You can see modest lay barriers on the benches, right? Because we know and have been told numerous times about the vagrancy issues. So we've, some of the benches have different designs that absolutely preclude laying down. Some of them just make it less comfortable to lay down. So this is one suite. The next one, Roderick, if you'd advance to it, is a lot more traditional. There's some of these sort of Gothic styled, not the exact same, but lights that are in the LUS catalog and present, I think, in maybe toward the university area a bit. So, these have, they're a lot more traditional, little flourishes here and there with sort of a light nouveau kind of flavor to them. And you can actually put in some Lafayette logo work or neighborhood things in different places, which is an option with some of the different pieces of furniture, but it's really sort of built into the concept with this suite. You can see a bench there with a clear break in the middle, so no one's ever going to lay on that. That's an option. Maybe they should all be that way. Maybe only some of them should be that way in certain locations. That trash can's not a good mix. That's just sitting there. We're still looking through the providers, but what we're looking for today is to hear from y'all as to which of these is your preference. But we have one more to show you. So that's a little bit too much over the top. The next one takes that same traditional look and just tones it down a little bit. So Roderick, there we go. So you can sort of see some of the same lines repeating, like the arm of the bench is curved instead of straight, but it just lacks a little bit of the ornamentation. And this particular suite also doesn't enable that local branding that can be done. That's just one of many fixtures. Just thinking stylistically, we're very aware of the light pollution uplight issue, and we're looking at cutoff fixtures. We're going to come back to you with a bunch of lighting conversation next month. We're going to talk about lighting too. You don't want to talk about lighting anymore. So of these, what do y'all think? Do you have any preferences? Are any of these ones you absolutely do not?
Hey, Derek, it's Neil. Could you go back to the first slide, the first set that you showed?
Is that one? There you go. And none of these is set in stone. So if you say, I kind of like this style, but I really don't like that, whatever it is, there's still some mixing and matching that can be done with slightly, related suites that can be mixed together. You can see some of these are from different providers and such. What do you think, Nate?
Well, I tell you, I was mainly looking at the lighting. I appreciate the, sticking with a dark sky compliant fixture. I think if there's any uplighting that needs to be done or any kind of building lighting, that we can address some of this stuff in an overlay district, later on down the line. My main concern would be to make sure to light as much as possible the pedestrian areas and pedestrian zones, to keep them lit, safe, and highly visible at night.
When we come back to you next month, we'll also have some depictions of the lighting scheme for the understructure, which I think you're gonna like. It's a good combination of different approaches.
Yeah, I think I
ahead.
also like more of a solid bollards that have maybe a lighting element in them. I think we're considering those for our University Avenue project. I know downtown is getting ready to be able to install its temporary bollards, so I don't think they really have. I don't know. I can't speak to it. I'm not sure how decorative or whether they're ordered from a catalog or more of a custom piece. I just am saying that it's probably going to be something that's can be acquired quickly, and again temporary in nature. So I don't think that's necessarily something we would have to use as part of our
that's
here.
Good that you brought it up, because we saw in the budget agreement that that came out that there was a dedication of lighting for downtown, and we were wondering where that is and who's going to do the design, so we can make sure that we're having the conversation right. And then who's the designer on the university project?
You would have to talk with Travis Smith.
Okay.
He's a project manager for that project.
Great.
I think some of the lighting for downtown, I think might be just conversions to LEDs.
Okay.
And then maybe a couple more light installations, but I think they're keeping the same thing. I don't think they're changing their standard.
Okay, thank you. Well, Roderick has suddenly reminded me. I'm sorry?
You need to verify that with Anita.
With Anita. Okay, from DDA. Great. Well, I almost forgot one whole suite, right? Which Roderick has subtly brought back up for us. So thank you, sir. This is a warm approach to a suite of design fixtures. I'm completing a job on Broadway going through downtown San Antonio, and we similarly proposed a warm suite, and it would use a little bit of woods, really super long lasting woods, in some cases simulated woods, the Corten steel, you know, as a similar sort of orange brown color that works into that suite and warms it. You know, this is mixing utilitarian and warm. Those can be separated out, of course, but you know, this is, I think, mixing both things. So the warmth comes in the color and the wood and the human way that, you know, wood is relatable sometimes more than metal, but it also is somewhat utilitarian. You could like one more than the other and say, well, I do like the warmth of that color, but utilitarian, the little blocks, the I-beams used for the swings, that's not our style, right? So
I like this last version, Derek, except the wood to me would be a non-starter because of maintenance. It's gonna mold very quickly, and as soon as it does that, it will lose a lot of the aesthetic benefits until it gets maintained, and that'll start driving up the cost. You know, and 1 or 2 bad fiscal years, and it'll start looking very bad. And you know,
I don't know. My thought on this is that maybe the material is less variable in temperature, so you don't have hot benches or cold benches depending on the season.
yeah, like I said, Neil, I like it. I just you know, it just comes down to you know, within a few years of its installation, will it still have the benefit that we liked about it when it got installed?
Yeah, I think we would probably be more on the end of the simulated and synthetic woods than natural.
This is Andy Narcan. If I may chime in, going back to the idea of the synthetic woods or woods, if anything can be damaged by the public, it will be. And that includes synthetics. I'm talking about cigarette ash, sharp objects, anything can get into it. And as far as the idea of heat and cold temperature changes, even those synthetic woods are very susceptible to that. The darker the color, the hotter they get to the feel. They absorb that sunlight, they absorb that heat.
Mm-hmm.
My first preference, going back to the first slide, was the bench with no back and the 2 lay down barriers. That way they could be accessible from any side, wherever side you wanted to sit on. 2 people could actually sit opposite each other and have conversation face to face rather than side to side. I think that would allow for some nice aesthetics and very low maintenance in the powder coating. And that would be my suggestion, is to go toward longevity and less maintenance down the road. I don't think that temperature will be that much of a barrier, because usually people will have clothes on and or, you know, some protection when they sit down. So I don't think that's going to be a major drawback to any type of bench that's there. I just think the aesthetics and practicality of that bench with the 2 lay down barriers with no back on and that powder coated bronze would offer some accessibility and an ease of placement in various areas for any pedestrian moving around.
Very thoughtful. Thank you.
Yes.
Y'all are so practical, thinking about the long term. That's great.
You have to in this city with limited funds. I mean, who wants to sit there and pay for things 10 times over? If we can do it one time and have it last longer, we're so much better off to be practical with the tax dollars we spend.
Indeed.
That's all I have for right now. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank
and
you.
ladies.
Who else is out there? Who hadn't said anything? This is a safe thing to comment on. There's no cost implications or political implications. Which style do y'all like? I see a few names that I haven't heard from. I could call your name, or you could go ahead and just chime in.
back to the lay down barriers, I think that's very important in the regards to vagrancy and protection for people downtown or any area really. So that's a consideration on the benches, and that's something you wouldn't have with synthetic structures and synthetic wood benches.
Yeah, that thinking ripples through our lighting approaches, the furniture, the bench approaches, and some of our sight lines, landscaping, making sure spots can be seen, that there's no hidden villages, et cetera. Yeah, that's going to ripple through a lot of the design choices that we were making.
And
All good.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to let everybody know we have about 10 minutes left in breakout, so you're doing great. Keep going.
And that bench with no back really kind of fits in with almost anything you put out there. You know, it doesn't add or take away. It's just there. So that might be an easy design to put into any aesthetic type value with whatever lighting or whatever you put also.
Thank you for that. Well, with 10 minutes to go, if anyone has not commented on the furnishings and would still like to, please do so. But otherwise, let's open this up, and maybe there's something that we skipped over earlier or related to all this that wasn't even a slide. So if you have an unrelated question or assertion, it might be something appropriate to this conversation. Obviously, if it's about CSS and some of the things we can control, we'd like to hear it. We'll be coming back to you next month with lighting, landscaping and GI issues, some intersection treatments where we're going to play with some different tinted concrete concepts and crossing concepts that and get your opinion on those. Talk about some potentially some fencing issues and some other design details. We'd like to be able to come back with all of our, and eventually, you know, what we're doing right now is defining what will be in the EIS, right? So the EIS is going to be super expensive and take forever if we have 8 or 9 different alternatives. So we're really trying to winnow down the options and start an EIS process with a really clear design. And so in order to complete the visual analysis and make sure that the historic districts are minimally impacted, et cetera, we'll be producing a number of renderings of what this project looks like from different directions. And so we'd like to get some of this feedback so that those renderings would be populated with the things that you choose. Obviously, the furnishings is not a mission critical decision to be made at this point, but it makes all the renderings more realistic. And you know, these will be, you know, y'all are the inner circle with whom we collaborate first. After y'all tell us what's going on, we go out and talk to the neighborhoods and have a wide open public meeting with everybody who would like to come and comment. But you know, y'all are key to helping us figure some things out along the way before we get there.
Derek, will the EIS dictate the location and quantity of the furnishings, or will that just be used for the renderings with no guarantee they will be built out?
A little bit of both. So there's a cost component and there's a cost estimate along the way. And so what I foresee is that we will make an assertion about certain nodes along the boulevard and nodes along the multi-use path in the understructured program where there would be some furnishings that serve a transportation purpose, right? The extent of that, I'm not yet sure of. There's some detailed conversations we're going to have with DOTD and FHWA about that. And then, so I can see us saying, for instance, the project is including these furnishings in these locations. And then it would be up to local partners to add more of that if need be, or that we would all agree that we're going to show more of it all the way along, but that it's understood that some of those costs are borne by someone other than DOTD and FHWA. But yeah, some modicum of clarity will be in the EIS. Yes.
Well, yeah, my concern is that if the EIS doesn't dictate precisely what will be installed and the record decision doesn't require it, then beyond that, including it in renderings is propaganda. If it's not going to be built or guaranteed that'll be built, and it's not going to be funded, then including it in what you show the general public as if it's part of the project is propaganda. And that goes
That's
for
right.
all the improvements that we're discussing.
That's
I
right.
mean, it's across the board. Every time something gets mentioned and every rendering that we see, from street trees on down, if it's not getting installed, then it shouldn't be in a rendering, because beyond that, it is just propaganda. And Lafayette is a conservative city that if DOTD says, oh, the local city is going to be paying for that, chances are we're not. We're a city that likes to spend as little as we can on, as you know, across the board. And if we can't, if DOTD is not going to guarantee it's going to get built, DOTD shouldn't be using it to promote their project.
I do understand what you're saying. We will be really clear. I mean, the purpose of the EIS is to be super clear about what exactly is the project and defining it. Now, there may be places where we also want to express something like the under structure program, but where we do so, we will make super clear in the figures and in the text. But for example, you know, there's not been enough of a local process that has arrived at certainty to know exactly what features would be included underneath the structure immediately north of 6th Street. Right? We've heard a lot of ideas, but you know, nobody's owning that program. It's not advanced significantly through local partners. So we don't want to depict it as being devoid. We will be very clear who has to do what in the document, but we will also want to say, you know, there are some options, but making sure to be clear about what is in the project and what is not. That would apply to the street furnishings as well.
Well, you know, I'm as I mentioned that, you know, I'm thinking about the Louisiana Avenue interchange at I-10, and I guarantee you no renderings of that site showed it being used as a aggregate storage and construction equipment storage site. And that's all it's been used for years. And, you know, otherwise it's an attractive area that DOTD within its right of way has used it for other purposes that I 100% am certain DOTD wouldn't have presented in its renderings of that site. And I'm concerned that the same is happening here on most of the renderings that y'all show of under structure and street furnishings, et cetera. If it's not going to be built in the end, and DOTD and FHWA aren't going to guarantee it be built, then it should not be included in renderings of the project. If anything beyond that, and it's propaganda, it's not part of the study.
Understand what you're saying. I can't speak to the Louisiana project. I don't think we have plans for any piles of aggregate past construction, but
we do know that there's a contaminated site that may be undergoing remediation for longer than the construction of the roadway itself. So renderings of that area that show, you know, daycare playgrounds are completely impractical. So showing those, you know, as is repeatedly done, I think is a propaganda technique, and trying to convince us to agree to a $1 billion project by using things that aren't actually going to be built as part of that project, I don't think fits the CSS process, the EIS process, or as it's legally prescribed and as y'all have promised it to be.
That's right. Defining the project. That's the stage we're in now. Getting clarity on that, and that's what we will carry forward. You've seen a lot of different ideas, a lot of spaghetti on the wall for a few years now. We're in a very different stage now. So I think we're at 29. So in another minute,
Yeah,
I think
we've got
it's
one more
automatically
minute.
going to jump us into the group, right?
It will. We've got 1 minute. It's going to take us, we're going to quantum leap into the main session here in just a second.
Right. You know, as I'd mentioned, this is an ongoing conversation. We'll be back again together in a month. In between, the conversation can keep going. Anyone can send us a comment on it on any day. And obviously, there's lots of side conversations going on with LCG, LUS, and other folks about, you know, things like lighting standards.